Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease that is increasingly prevalent each year, especially in young children. When referring to diabetes, there is a common misconception that there is only one single disease. This is because many scholars lump the two types of diabetes together. However, for the purpose of this presentation, it is important to recognize type 1 diabetes as an individual disease. According to diabetes researcher Betty Tao, the primary difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes is that type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, which means that it is not preventable. There are many theories about environmental triggers, hereditary gene abnormalities, and even food consumption. However, the true cause of type 1 diabetes is unknown. Type 2 diabetes, on the other hand, is attributed to a patient's lifestyle choices, such as their diet and exercise regimens. While certain populations may be more likely than others to develop type 2 diabetes, the disease is fully preventable. According to diabetes experts Wenpeg Yu and Massage Henneberg, type 1 diabetes affects approximately 387 million people worldwide. In type 1 diabetics, the islet cells, which are cells that secrete insulin and reside in the pancreas, are attacked and destroyed by the body's own immune system for reasons unknown. The problem here is that insulin is needed in order to survive, as the purpose of insulin is to be released into the bloodstream and bring blood glucose levels back down into a healthy range between 70 and 120 milligrams per deciliter. This function is necessary because when a person eats, any carbohydrates ingested from their meal metabolize into glucose and raise the blood glucose level within that person's body. If this function were to not be performed, the high glucose levels would eventually lead to an inevitable death. According to medical researcher Linda DiMaglio, it is for this reason that type 1 diabetes was deemed a terminal illness until the discovery of this life-saving liquid, man-made insulin, in 1922. While insulin has saved and continues to save an astronomical amount of lives, it is important to understand that it is not a cure for type 1 diabetes. Since type 1 diabetes has no known cure, any population statistic of this disease is unfortunate. But what is more troubling is the notable increase in prevalence of type 1 diabetes diagnoses. It is currently not known why this uptrend of diagnoses exists, but the numbers are steadily increasing every year without fail. Furthermore, Linda DiMaglio stated that the greatest observed increase exists in children younger than 5 years old. It is frightening to imagine children so young being vulnerable to the major health issues associated with type 1 diabetes, such as hypoglycemia and diabetic ketoacidosis. Both of these conditions can be fatal. In fact, J. Morales and D. Schneider noted that 10% of deaths of type 1 diabetics are associated with hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is the event in which a patient's blood glucose level drops below 70 milligrams per deciliter. Since this state of health can be deadly, assumptions are often made that a hypoglycemic event is rare. This assumption could not be further from the truth. It is not uncommon for a diabetic to experience hypoglycemia on a monthly, if not weekly basis. If the patient fails to address the state of hypoglycemia through either consuming or injecting carbohydrates, their blood glucose level will continue to drop. Eventually, the hypoglycemia will mature into diabetic ketoacidosis, or diabetic coma as it is commonly referred to. If left untreated, a type 1 diabetic will pass away fairly quickly. While yes, it is true that a type 1 diabetic can now live a full and complete life, patients have to actively manage their disease. Insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitors, test strips, insulin shots, site changes, glucagons, and plenty of other hassles are part of a type 1 diabetic's daily life. For meals, the American Diabetic Association recommends carbohydrate counting as the most effective management method. This means that every meal, snack, and drink has to be analyzed and accounted for. Following a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, carbohydrate counting presents a significant lifestyle change, which is both immediate and challenging. In summation, type 1 diabetes is a very complex disease. Thank you for listening.